All right, let's talk about the hidden ethics behind all those charts and graphs we see, every single day. We're diving into a university technical writing module that really gets at a crucial question. When does a visual stop informing you and start deceiving you?
You've totally had that feeling, right? You're looking at a chart, maybe in a news article or some report, and your gut just tells you, something's not quite right here. It feels a little manipulative, but you can't exactly put your finger on why. Well, that instinct, that's exactly what we're going to break down today.
Okay, so here's the absolute core of it all. Every single visual you see is making an argument. It's not just some neutral, clean window looking out onto the data. Nope, it's a carefully constructed representation. The person who made it, they made choices. What to show you, what not to show you, and how to frame it. And that, right there, is where the ethics come crashing in.
So let's dive into our first section. The whole idea here is that because these visuals are arguing a point, they come with this really heavy ethical weight. The power to persuade is also the power to mislead. And here's what's so fascinating, or maybe a little scary. A visual can be totally misleading, even when every single number on it is technically correct. The trick isn't in the data itself, it's in the design choices. It's about how it's framed, what's been left out, and what's been cranked up to 11. That is the real, and sometimes dangerous, power of visual communication.
Okay, so if visuals can be this tricky, how on earth do we make sure they're being honest? Well, the good news is there's actually a pretty clear ethical framework we can use. Let's get into what we can call the rules of honesty. So the whole foundation of doing this ethically really boils down to three core principles. They're actually pretty simple to remember, but they are so powerful when you put them into practice. We're talking about transparency, accuracy, and accountability. Think of these as the absolute baseline for professional integrity. So let's break that down. Transparency, that's about showing the whole picture, not just the convenient parts. Accuracy, well, that just means making sure the story the visual tells is the same story the data tells. And accountability, that's all about owning your work, saying who made it and what data they used. If you violate any one of these, you're pretty much crossing an ethical line. All right, now for the really fun part. Let's get practical. How do you actually spot a visual lie out in the wild? We're going to become data detectives for a minute and look at a couple of the most common visual fallacies. These are the specific tricks people use to make data deceive you.
First up, we have an absolute classic, cherry picking. You've probably heard of this one. It's when someone carefully selects only the data points that support what they want to say and, whoops, conveniently ignores everything else that might contradict them. So they're not technically lying about the numbers they do show you, but it's a lie by omission, which can be just as bad.
And here is a perfect example of how that works. On the one hand, you see a chart that just screams success. Look at that sharp, dramatic increase. Awesome. But what they're hiding is the full picture. The whole data set shows that tiny little spike was just a blip in a long, steady decline. See what they did? They told a truth, but they absolutely did not tell the truth.
Okay, next up is one of the sneakiest, most common tricks in the book, the misleading y-axis. This is where someone messes with the vertical scale on a chart to make tiny, honestly insignificant changes look like these massive, dramatic shifts. And this is where it gets really, really clever. Or, deceptive. So look at this. By starting the axis way up high, say at 90, a really small change suddenly looks enormous. But the honest version, the one that starts at 0, where it should, shows the change is actually pretty minor. Now, why is this so darn effective? It's basically a brain hack. Our brains are wired to judge the relative size of the bars, not just read the tiny numbers. By chopping off the bottom, one bar can look 3 or 4 times bigger than the other, even if the real data only changed by a few percentage points. It's the exact same data, but a totally different story.
Okay, so we know the tricks of the trade now, but why does this matter so much? Who cares, right? Well, it matters a lot, because this isn't just some academic exercise. In the real world, using these tricks can have some really serious consequences.
The stakes are incredibly high. For the person who actually makes one of these misleading visuals, it could mean completely destroying their professional credibility. It could get their work retracted from a publication. They could face disciplinary action from their employer, or even wind up in actual legal trouble. This is so much more than just making pretty charts. It's about professional integrity, through and through. So let's wrap this up with your ethical toolkit, the things you need to take away. Number one, always remember that visuals are making an argument, they're not just illustrations. Number two, use your ethical compass. Those three big words, transparency, accuracy, and accountability. And number three, keep your eyes peeled for those common fallacies. Being able to spot this stuff isn't just a neat party trick, it's a truly critical professional skill. And all of this really brings us back to that big question we started with. We know visuals are supposed to persuade. That's their power, that's what they do. So where exactly is that line? Where do we cross over from honest persuasion into outright deception? How can we use visuals to make a really strong point, but do it without lying? You know, maybe the answer is actually pretty simple. Ethical persuasion isn't about spinning the data to fit your story. It's about starting with the full, honest truth, and then using good design to make that truth as clear and compelling as possible. Because at the end of the day, the most persuasive visual is often the most honest one.